Well, good morning, pharmacy aficionados. Welcome back to www.salessystem.com.au. My name's Glenn Guilfoyle and I head up the specialist group called The Next Level, and we specialise in scoring and benchmarking, customer engagement effectiveness and script processing efficiency at the dispensary in retail pharmacy. And then we go on to assist those pharmacies or their dispensing teams in implementing the changes to reap the benefits. Moreover, we exist in the passionate belief that those pharmacies and dispensing teams that reinvent their service model to what we would call a high engagement and high counsel solution sales forward dispensing oriented model will rise above the twin challenges that we're seeing in the shape of PBS reform and the big box discounters as they impact negatively on community-based pharmacy. And so it is that we run this series of topics around that overall broad theme each month. Last month, in fact the last 2 months, we put together a two-part series looking at taking a deep dive into all of the data that we progressively collect in doing our work. And we had a look at how the scores on the behavioural or activity parts of the workflow correlate, or as it were, don't correlate, to the commercial outcomes. This month, I'd like to focus on the kickoff of a series of topics, again on that similar broad theme that we're going to be writing in forthcoming editions of AJP. And in order to kick off this little sneak preview, I actually want to start the story with a little bit of a parable. And it's a story of the traveller. As a traveller, we know that quite often there will be a fork in a road of a pathway that we've been travelling, beyond which the selection of which pathway to continue will often become a one-way journey thereafter. One pathway represents the continuation of the long-travelled pathway thus far. And it's been a bountiful pathway and one that's hard to deviate from. Alas, continuing on this pathway leads the traveller to its inevitable conclusion in the form of a burning platform. The road travelled thus far is no more. The alternative fork in the road leads the traveller to another place. And it's been described and heard of on the journey travelled thus far. But until the fork in the road, the traveller really hasn't had a motivation to hoe this alternative pathway to this mystical destination called the Promised Land. After all, the road travelled thus far has been enjoyable and rewarding. Almost a fool's paradise. Why change? But now the fork in the road, faced with the inevitable forthcoming and looming burning platform, is not looking so friendly anymore. Alternatively, the other fork in the road leads to an unknown pathway, potentially potholed, even treacherous. And so the choice facing the traveller is one filled with angst. So let's apply this little parable now from the traveller to Australian industries, other than retail pharmacy to start with. Think and reflect on the rag trade in Australia, the car industry, print media, manufacturing. All these industries have reached their fork in the road before us in retail pharmacy. But now we can add retail pharmacy to these sorts of industries. The lesson that we learn from these industries that have reached the fork in the road before us is that those that adapt their service model to firstly survive and then thrive are the ones that usually make it through the journey on the alternative pathway to the new Promised Land. Those that continue on towards the burning platform typically consign themselves to history. Now, according to our research studying the dispensary workflow, as I said before, customer engagement effectiveness and script processing efficiency across some 140 odd pharmacies, our data suggests that at this stage, somewhere around 3 to 5% of retail pharmacies in Australia have actually made that selection on the new pathway. The good news is that those who have now shine a beacon on that pathway for the others and actually show and describe to us what it means to be truly a health destination in their community. And so in this series, we're going to highlight the learnings applicable to all owners, managers and staff of dispensaries in Australian retail pharmacies across two broad themes. The wealth of insights from this ever-growing pool of data that we collect when we go into pharmacy and do the measurements we do across 30 parameters that focus on all of the individual elements that make up the customer's experience in terms of engagement effectiveness and script processing efficiency. And the second broad area will be the case studies, vignettes and little cameos of these pioneering pharmacies who are conquering or have conquered the pathway to the new promised land. So these stories will be published in this series and written in such a way as we can all gain insights in terms of this movement to the high engagement, high counsel, high SELP forward dispensing model. Now, wait a minute, SELP. What is SELP? Well, SELP is really just a word that actually means helping the customers with the products and services when we're selling those appropriate products and services. After all said and done, this is the heart and soul of the New World Order. But this blue sky aspirational world is not one size fits all. And one of the lessons we're learning from working with some of these pioneering pharmacies is the notion that there are as many shapes and forms and manifestations of a forward-oriented dispensing service model as there are number of pharmacies who have tailored and executed. Bending the grey matter around this notion brings forward the question of what needs to change and why, and the dual question, the inevitable how question. Now, of course, forward dispensing in Australia is not a new concept. It was documented probably around 20 years ago in quite some detail around the time of the advent of the pharmacist advice model. Only now, as the vast majority of Australian pharmacies look down that pathway to see the burning platform, has this notion started to gain renewed conversation and appeal coming out of its 2-decade slumber. The problem we often see in regards to the dual question of what needs to change and why is the situation of denial. I'm out there speaking to my customers, giving advice day in, day out. Unwittingly, innocently even, the pharmacist in the maelstrom of the busy life day in, day out in the dispensary truly believes this to be their reality. Unwittingly, because they see this situation from a somewhat solipsistic viewpoint, it's only when the ruler is run over the actual customer's experience from a metrics perspective that we start to get a more objective and scientific view that differs from the pharmacists. And when we take it from the customer's perspective, we find often that as they move from pharmacy to pharmacy, they find that the service level in very many cases is Counsel is only a small part or portion of engagement, and waiting time is even longer. We will explore these sorts of stats and metrics in this forthcoming series as they represent the current standards of service delivery at the dispensary in Australian pharmacy, and as a point of view for owners, staff and managers to think about how they would go about differentiating their service model from the other pharmacy choices that customers have in their area. The dual problem we often see around the question of how is another scenario born of innocence. Firstly, the how question does not even make it to the Richter scale unless there is an acceptance of the what needs to change and why. Right now, too many owners, managers and staff are still looking at the pharmacy or at least the pathway that has served them well, looking down to that burning platform in somewhat disbelief. For those that do make the decision to take the brave new pathway, there is usually a quick recognition of a lack of skills, knowledge, competency, and even a healthy dash of chutzpah within the dispensary team to actually make it happen and make it stick. All of the folk involved in the case studies, vignettes and cameos that we're going to showcase in this series regale their war stories and trophies of days, weeks, even months sometimes, where they feel like they were taking 3 steps forward, 3 steps backwards for 2 steps forward. Deep fundamental cultural change, a change in hearts and mind, people and process, after all, is never easy. And that is why a relatively small subset of the total population forged their direction in this new pathway as early pioneers. With the forthcoming series, they represent the beacon that lights the way on the case studies and the learnings that we'll focus on in regards to attempting to answer the how question. So please make a mark in your diary or schedules when your AJP comes out over coming months to allow. So make a note in your forthcoming arrivals of AJP to look out for this series of topics, and we hope that it allows you to have the discussion within the team, your team, on helping forge and improve your service model towards this notion of a high engagement, high counsel, high SELP service model at the dispensary. And of course, we're always just a phone call away if you'd like to have that discussion on a one-on-one basis in helping you move to the next level. I'm Glenn Guilfoyle. Bye for now, and we'll see you next month.